Let's now talk to three other specialists in a panel conversation. With me, I am honored to introduce Fredrika Klarén. She's head of sustainability of Polestar. She's a firm believer in the role of business as a catalyst for sustainable development, and she has also held sustainability positions over the past decades at IKEA and also at the Swedish fashion retailer Kappahl. Fredrika joined Polestar in April 2020 to drive the company's sustainability ambitions forward on issues such as climate neutrality, circularity, transparency, and inclusion. Welcome, Fredrika Klarén.
Thank you.
With me, I'm also very happy to introduce Robin Chase, founder of Zipcar. Robin Chase is co-founder and former CEO of Zipcar. That's the world's leading car-sharing network, as well as co-founder of Veniam, a network company that moves terabytes of data between vehicles and the cloud. So in 2019, she co-founded her first nonprofit, NUMO. And NUMO is a global alliance to challenge the opportunities presented by new urban mobility technologies to build cities that are sustainable and just. So, warm welcome to Robin Chase. And with us, we also have Carly Gilbert-Patrick. She sort of shared the road, global program lead at UNEP, and she manages the UNEP team for active mobility, digitalisation and mode integration, working with countries around the world to decouple mobility from increasing emissions. And she's been working in the field of sustainable mobility for about 15 years in the areas of active mobility, road safety, bus rapid transit, congestion charging, low emission zones, bike sharing systems, and digitalisation. So warm welcome to Carly Gilbert-Patrick. So I'd like to turn to you here on stage. Great to see all of you here. First, I'd like for you to reflect on Owen Gaffney's interview here on stage. Would you like to start, Fredrika?
Absolutely. I loved hearing Owen describing this amazing development that we are now seeing when it comes to electric vehicles. And I agree, it is amazing to be a part of this EV revolution. But we also at Polestar so clearly see and are a bit frustrated about that the transition is not happening fast enough. Even though we see growth, we still see that we're just a marginal player on the global car stock. So we really want to talk about how can we speed up this transition so that this climate solution that electric vehicles really are, I think we're going to get into the numbers later, so that we actually can tap into that during the 2020s and not see it as a tool for the 2030s. And how can we secure that we produce them in a sustainable way, and also that we don't try to really secure that all the fossil fuel cars are replaced by an electrical vehicle, because that will not be sustainable at all.
Thank you, Fredrika. Carly, you are impatient too. I know that for sure. What's your take on Owen's presentation?
Thank you. Really inspiring, Owen. Thank you. Lots of food for thought. And I think what really struck me is this realization that we're in the midst of a mobility disruption, a gear shift, if you like, a real change in thinking is needed. And I think for the first time, this kind of majority acceptance that we need to transform how we think about the earth, about how we use resources, and that we just cannot keep taking and taking and taking. And I think the other thing that it made me think about is, sometimes we want these kind of advanced solutions, but sometimes the most simple, straightforward, oldest solutions are right in front of us. And I know we'll get to talk more about that in a few moments. Thank you.
We will. Robin, your thoughts, please.
Yes, I was reflecting that when Owen was talking, and governments around the world were all wanting to say, yes, EV is the path forward. It's definitely part of the path forward, but we're not going to achieve our CO2 goals if we don't shift people from vehicles to those other things. And we're not going to solve all the other problems that come with our existing transportation problem. So while we're transforming the world, which is happening right now, we need to also solve multiple problems, not just CO2 emissions.
I'd like to stay with you, Robin. The connection to disruptive technologies that we spoke of in the previous section, it's strong, of course. But do we rely too much on these technologies and disruptive factors and focus too little on the human part, the human behavior in all of this?
Right. I feel like that has been the core of my work, is not looking at the vehicle, but how are people going to use that vehicle? What does it imply to them? And we know that right now we've built out our entire infrastructure to make cars the simple and easy choice, completely reducing the viability of going by other modes. And that has caused huge problems to date. And if I think about EVs as the perception of our only choice, it means that we're doubling down on this broken system where people are unable to safely travel other ways. So I love technology, and it enables us to become multimodal. I would say that is profoundly true, and multimodal in that we can choose to walk or to bike or to take transit or take a car, but to be able to choose the right vehicle for each particular trip. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you, Robin. My colleague Nick mentioned that we're all parts of the jigsaw puzzle. Fredrika, when you listen to Robin talk about behavior changes and Polestar's traction in this field, could you elaborate on your view here?
Absolutely. We believe that we cannot simply rely on disruptive technologies to solve this. I agree with Robin. We have to look to the power of behavioral changes as well. And we at Polestar, we would like to see ourselves as a player in a new, more circular mobility ecosystem. And we try to think of designing our cars to have a place in another, better way of moving about that is more dynamic and where you have a diverse set of ways of, and also safe ways of moving around. So I think that what we do when it comes to transparency around cars can really promote behavioral changes in the way that it empowers the consumers to understand the impact that cars have. We have declared a footprint for the car you see behind me, Polestar 2. It rolls out of the factory gates with a footprint of 26 tons. And we really want to make sure that our consumers and our customers are aware of that they come with a debt and what they can do to secure that it stays as low as possible by charging green, but also that by using the car, really securing a high utilization degree, you can actually secure that we also don't overproduce cars. And I just think that the way we work with being transparent toward consumers hopefully will enable this behavioral change that we will see.
Thank you, Fredrika. I'd like to stay with you. You are claiming to, you brand yourself as the first truly climate neutral car.
No, it's not climate neutral
no,
today.
I just said that when I looked at my script card. That's not going to be possible. Of course, you just said 22 tons, but you brand yourself as really being cutting edge in this field. You mentioned transparency. In terms of really making this happen in factories, and how do you really get to the goal that you're really working towards?
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is the Moonshot goal that we have set out for ourselves, yes. And that Owen also spoke about, that we want to create a climate neutral car by 2030, which means that the 26 tons that we see today for Polestar 2, cradle to gate when it rolls out of the factory. For Polestar 0, that will be 0. And that means that we have 8 years of a lot of research, a lot of advanced engineering, a lot of working with our suppliers to secure that the 20,000 plus components going into a car all can be produced with 0 emissions. And that will take all of the nerdiness that we have and design, sensibility, and love of innovation and technology to really secure this. And we're going to be fully transparent in this journey. We really want to be guiding stars in the industry. So whatever solutions we find, we want to spread them. And we will bring our consumers and customers along for this. We will declare footprints for all of the coming models. And when we get to Polestar 0, they will see on the declaration that it has a 0 carbon footprint. That's our goal.
It's a goal.
Can I just add one
Absolutely,
point
Robin.
there?
Go ahead.
When we talk about the debt that a car comes with and how that we want to make good use of that vehicle in order to make good use of that carbon debt, I like that idea. And I'd like to just make sure that we know overtly what that means is we need to have multiple people sharing that car. We need to have as many people as possible in that vehicle because you want to get the CO2 emissions per passenger kilometer that includes its entire life cycle spread across as much transportation as we want. And what we wouldn't like is that one person drives it all the time by themselves to draw down their debt, right? We want to make sure the car is full and that as many people as possible can use it so that we're making good use of that debt that comes with a multiple ton vehicle.
But we have to get there before 2030, right, Robin? We cannot wait for that to happen before 2030. I mean, cars stand still 96% of the time today in 2021. So Polestar Zero project will aim to reduce the emissions and get those down to zero when it leaves the factory gates. But I hope to see a lot of solutions to get the utilization rates up before we reach 2030.
Excellent, thank you. Carly, I'd like to turn to you. We talk about circularity and climate today here. In terms of materials, circularity, and the mobility sector, how do we maneuver around? For instance, how do we address the topic of batteries and rare minerals? This is huge. From your perspective, what are the main sort of goals we have to set here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very tricky topic. And I think, first of all, we have to accept that none of the solutions we have right now are necessarily perfect. But what we do know is electric is the way to go. And, you know, at UNEP, we have a global electric mobility program working with over 50 countries to support them in their transition to electric. And part of the program and part of what we're working at is how to make those batteries as sustainable as possible and looking at the battery life, how they're used, how they can have a second life and a third life. And I think what, like Fredrika said, we have to be transparent and we have to be open and we have to accept that there is no perfect solution. And I think going back to something that Robin said, that yes, of course, there will always be a need for cars. And, you know, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, do we even need them? And I always say, you know, I love my car, but I also love walking and I also love cycling. And there is no one solution. And we need a system and we need to give consumers choice. You know, I spent most of my adult life growing up in London and I never drove. I never owned a car. I never even was able to drive. As soon as I moved to Nairobi, the first thing I did was learn to drive and buy a car and start driving. And it's the same Carly, right? So the reason is the options that were available to me in Nairobi were completely different than in London. So I think as much as we focus on this global electric mobility transition, and rightly so, we need to equally put as much investment and priority and focus on other options. And remember that in much of the global south, up to 90% of citizens are walking and cycling. And actually, they will never be able to afford any car. And we need to keep them safe and protect them. And when they do have a bit of money, we want them to keep walking for short journeys and not jump on an emitting motorbike. So we need to do lots of things at the same time.
Thank you, Carly. I'm turning now to Robin again. Behavioural changes. I'd like to just go back to that a bit. How do we, I mean, you're a pioneer in this field with Zipcar. Are you seeing a more of acceptance of the sharing systems for cars, for mobility in a different perspective? I know the pandemic has really sort of put a big roadblock to this. What do you see ahead in this behavioral change aspect of being able to share cars and, well, mobility as a whole?
I guess I've had an epiphany recently. So number one, we need to make these options, finding them, paying for them, getting into them, all of the options, easy and convenient. And I think Zipcar did that. And I've always felt like that is a baseline criteria for living a multimodal life. But I have recently understood more strongly that we need to make space for these other options in their safety, that cars have now absorbed almost all the space in cities, all the rights of way, all the parking space, and we need to make mobility mode neutral cities, mode neutral options. And that will mean, to be absolutely honest, we need to start restricting the number of lanes, the amount of parking that cars get today, so that we can make bus rapid transit lanes, so we can make safe biking and walking lanes. That is how we create this optionality. So just making these other options easy and convenient is important and required, but it's not enough. And I guess I would point to the Netherlands, which I think is, for me, the apex of making walking and biking network as spectacular as possible, yet their kilometers traveled per person per year is as high as every other European country. So I said, whoa, you need more than just a great optionality. We need to restrict car travel as well.
I just want to give a wonderful example. I was moderating an event 2 days ago, and was talking about my home city, Malmö, the south of Sweden, and the entire parking Malmö, the big entity in the city, they're now rebranding them completely as Mobility Malmö. So they're scrapping their 200-year-old name of Parking Malmö to Mobility Malmö, and they're totally refocusing on sharing, electrical vehicles, bikes, etc. And they're actually also building a parking garage 100% in wood, which is pretty cool. Speaking of decision makers in cities, I'm sure there are many of them watching here today. Fredrika, if you'd like to just talk straight to the camera and imagine that there are decision makers here. They could be in the Swedish government, you're Swedish, or the EU, or internationally, even higher up. What do you need to make the speed of what you're aiming to do increase?
I think we need to really level up on our courage now. This is so clearly about future-proofing ourselves as businesses. We at Polestar so clearly see that we're embarking, or we're in the transition into the fourth industrial revolution, which will be driven by sustainability and digitalization. So the train has really already left. It's just how quickly we will get there that is the question. So we need bold decision makers now, both from a policy perspective and in businesses as well. And I still see a lot of businesses, for example, in the car industry, investing in legacy technology. They are scared to really jump on the electrical vehicle transition. And I would just urge them to really be more bold. And we're not seeing commitments in line with actually the 1.5 degree pathway. I believe that we're in some kind of weird climate echo chamber, and we're comforting ourselves with saying that, oh, we're committed to becoming net zero in 2040, and the UK is banning the sales of fossil fuel car in 2030. But if you look at the numbers, it's not cutting it. It's not enough. We actually think, from Polestar's point of view, that we need to ban sales of fossil fuel cars by 2025 in the main markets, the G20 markets. So bold decisions from decision makers, and yeah, that's my message.
Thank you very much, Fredrika. I'm turning now to Carly. You are part of a big organization that has a lot of power, of course, but even so, please, just from your heart, what do you need to make your work and your goals happen faster?
I think that the first thing is we need to accept and be honest that the science is clear. We keep talking about needing more evidence and more data, but actually it's clear the science is there. We are in the midst of a triple planetary crisis. It's affecting the climate, it's affecting nature, it's affecting pollution. We can't just keep on with business as usual. It's not working. We can't wait for 2025, 2030. We need to change now. And one of the things that we can really do that is so straightforward and does not cost much is protect and promote active mobility, walking and cycling. It has to be part of the solution.
Thank you very much, Carly. And Robin?
I admire and agree with my co-panelists here that it is all about bold decision-making and moving. I think about the idea of how do we evolve as quickly as we can with what we have. So it's going as fast as we didn't even imagine is possible. And that this multimodal lifestyle where we do go by walking and by foot is a requirement for us to achieve our CO2 goals. And it can be done very quickly. Very quickly, we can be restriping. I love the idea of 2025 as a goal when we sell no more fossil fuel cars. And to think a lot about in this transition to electric vehicles, which we are all kind of consumed with, is we want to electrify immediately right this second, and government should do it out of the gate, the intensively used vehicles. So every delivery vehicle, every taxi, all cars, school buses, those are the ones we need to go first, and to give more space to these active modes.
Thank you, Robin. Just a final reflection here also. Pressure from citizens and from people buying or sharing cars. I remember when I bought or rented at least a fully electric car 6 years ago, my colleagues, my friends said, "Are you crazy? You can only drive 150 kilometers." But I said, well, somebody has to do it, take the steps, and we see this in more and more that people are we have to really act on this. And Fredrika, from your point of view, from Polestar, for consumers, companies and private consumers, how should they sort of think about this? It's not really an option. You don't get the anxiety of reach any longer, especially not with your models. But in terms of stepping a little bit out of your comfort zone as a consumer of mobility and cars, the car section, what can you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I've driven electrical vehicles now for 8 years. It's so easy. It's so fun. I just wish that everyone can understand that. I have come to the conclusion. I've worked with sustainability for 10 years. Now I understand that it's really up to the individuals. Companies and policymakers, they do exactly what customers and voters tell them to do. So it is really up to each and every one of us to change and to really put more pressure and to be really outspoken on what you want. When you go to purchase a car or just anything, use your consumer power. It is so powerful. And also, just lastly, there are actually apps out there to share cars. We don't have to come up with this in the industry. It is something that is accessible today for everyone. You can just download an app if you're just curious and you are bold enough to make that behavioral change.
And we need more bold politicians and consumers. And speaking of apps and consumer pressure, I will now invite back Ingmar Bentzag on stage. But you please stay on stage, stay on Zoom. You're on my stage, so I say Zoom. And here's Ingmar. Welcome back.
I have an ID to Polestar to demonstrate that is posted on in the We Don't Have Time app. Let me see if I can find it.
During the broadcast?
I think it came in. Yeah, I think so. We'll see here. Or it was 7 hours ago, so it was before the broadcast. But it's what it's all about. It's a climate ID to Polestar, and it's about that you should cooperate with Zipcar and integrate a car sharing app into the car from the beginning. People could just buy a Polestar and they could start earning money by having it parked outside, and they don't have to lend the key to anyone. It just works digitally. And by listening to you here, I think you should continue the conversation, because I think you have something there, actually. And you have the consumer, they want it. As you can see here, 49 people wants to buy this, and now it's 40.
So go in and continue liking this, maybe you might convince. So Fredrika, what do you say about this climate idea?
Well, it's great that I know Robin now, since we have this great business opportunity. Well, for us, the technology is in the car. I mean, we have this interesting Google interface in the car, which can absolutely enable downloading apps like this in the future. So without saying too much, it's super interesting.
I would add to that, she's right, that these things exist right now. And so I was thinking, as we were having this conversation, that individuals, when they go to buy their car, which I'd like them to think hard about, we always buy the largest car we will ever need in the whole year. We think, okay, in August for my 1 week's vacation, I need this big thing. So I would like people to focus on what do they need 90% of the time or 95% of the time? And for that small, that one trip, that 2 trips a year, for them to go rent a car. And I bet they would save money over their whole year's expenses. And just the idea that your one vehicle has to do every possible thing and then we buy too much, that we need to buy what we need for most of our life. And then in this multimodal sense, I can go rent a car at another time. So there are apps to exist to buy cars, and we have to get to share cars, and we have to get in the mindset of it's not one size fits all. I can choose different things seamlessly.
Thank you. And Carly, from where you're located, how would this be changing the traffic situation if you could have electrical cars, Polestar cars, for instance, to be shared easily in your city?
Right, I'm going to be really honest. So where I am situated, 70% of the people are walking. And they will be lucky if they could maybe afford a bicycle in the next 12 months. So from where I'm sitting, I'm really bothered about stopping these crazy road fatalities, children dying on the streets because they can't cross the road safely. And yes, of course, I see the benefit and the value of car share. And when I'm in Europe, that's exactly what we do. But right now, I just need safe sidewalks for the people that I'm trying to support in countries all over Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And it's really tough because all of this focus is elsewhere. And I'm just trying to pull it back for the majority. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your very important perspective. And for Robin and Fredrika, well, to be continued. Your conversation about this will hopefully be fruitful. Thank you, Carly, and thank you, Fredrika, and thank you, Robin, for joining us.